Welcome, everyone. My name is Danielle Jones. I'm the Admissions and Client Support Manager here at Venture for Canada, and I get the great honor to moderate and support this session here with Nora today. I'm totally thrilled to be here and to be joined and to get to learn from Nora. A quick introduction. Nora is an HR expert with a decade of experience in the design and technology industries. After helping some of the most successful Canadian startups grow, she has a unique view into building healthy organizations. She's a frequent speaker on inclusivity, designing HR, and the future of work. I'm a firm believer there's no one better to tell your story than yourself, so I'll pass it over to Nora here to introduce herself and kick off our session on how not to F up your company's culture in your early days. She's going to dive into how to structure people operations, departments, and policies to ensure success early on. Thanks all so much for joining. Over to you, Nora.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Danielle. And hi, everyone. Good to virtually be here with my plant and picture of plant. So I'm Nora. I'll get into a little bit more about myself soon, but I want to give a little bit of an introduction as to what we're talking about today and how it might be helpful, so you know that you're in the right place. So in my career, I've worked with over 100 early stage startup founders to build their first version of HR, whatever that looks like. Most of those are kind of seed to Series A stage. A lot of them have never had an HR person or process or structure before. Maybe it's something that their VC said they have to have. Maybe it's something that's important to them. A lot of them are all in and they realize that, you know, the people are the most important thing and they want to get that right. A few of them need like a bit more convincing, but they all have one thing in common, which is they don't want to fuck up the people part. So this talk is normally aimed at founders themselves and small business owners, but I've tweaked it really for HR folks who are maybe at those earlier stage startups and are looking to either learn for some of the pitfalls to avoid, learn some of the ways that, you know, we found out of them or in preventing them, or even just looking for some good tips to convince your founder or your boss to invest more time and money into people programs. So we're going to cover a lot of that. So I don't advocate using fear-based motivation as a downward management strategy, but it can be effective upward. It's sort of like comedy. It's like you can like punch up, but not down. So, you know, there's no boss or manager or founder that wants to be the team with turnover, with declined offers, especially in this market, or a scandal covered in beta kit, just some local Canadian tech stuff. In short, these are I'm going to be covering the most common messes that we clean up in early to mid stage startups, how to prevent them and how to fix them. So welcome. A little bit more about me. So I was raised by a punk rock singer and a dancer on a flower farm, so not a very corporate upbringing. When I entered the world of work myself, I really knew nothing about navigating corporate cultures. It felt like, you know, a language that I couldn't speak. I felt like I wasn't smart. I felt like I didn't get it. I felt like everybody had been like taught this language that I didn't know. And I spent a few years trying to figure it out and fit into that and do kind of a little like anthropological investigation, like what is this world? And then I realized it just really didn't have to be that way. So, you know, and it became my passion to build workplaces that really fit smoothly into who we are as humans, where nobody felt like they had to mask or learn to be someone they're not, where they feel supported. So I wanted to go basically back to first principles and figure out how to do that. So really, I spent many years working with different companies that let me tinker with how HR works. I've never actually worked anywhere particularly corporate. I've worked at a lot of different creative companies and agencies, and then a few startups as well. And, you know, I felt like we weren't really reaching these companies soon enough still. So most companies will hire their first HR person maybe at around like 40 employees or so. So 5 years ago, I started Bright and Early. So to really start to reach these companies earlier. And what Bright and Early is a really future forward, modern HR consultancy with a very inclusivity informed perspective. So we work with companies that are in that same stage, kind of like seed to Series A. Maybe they've never done any kind of HR before at all. And we come in and we build custom, inclusive, well-designed, well-oiled machines for the people side of things. So we build recruiting processes, onboarding processes, career paths, like equitable compensation, like policy work, and then also just advising these founders and employees along the way. We also do some consulting on the DEI side and some training as well. And right now we're a team of 15. And, in the past 5 years, we've worked with, like I mentioned, over 100 companies in helping them get this set up. So our general mission really is to help all workplaces be more human and inclusive. So we actually open source a lot of our work as well. I believe in, not hoarding information and just sharing everything that we know. And we just want everyone to practice in a way that is building better workplaces for everyone. So we're happy to talk about it, like for today, like we're doing today. And then we also share a lot of our work via our newsletter and then also our digital magazine that we publish early, where we publish takes on the future of work, as well as guides on how we do everything and how you can steal it and do it too. So let's get into it. So founders are often like so focused on recruiting. They invite the whole neighborhood to a party basically, but they forget to thoughtfully design that party. So, sometimes you get to that party and there's no food, there's no decorations, and the host doesn't even introduce you to anyone. They just give you like a MacBook and say good luck. So if you've been onboarded to a startup, you know this feeling, especially if you're the first HR person, as many of you have been, and it's going to be your job to set it up. So my last full-time role before starting Bright and Early was as the first people and operations person at Wealthsimple. So I joined them at around like 15, 20 people, like pretty small. And they told me, their big problem was hiring and they couldn't hire fast enough and, all of these things. But then in my own interview, I think it got rescheduled like 3 times. And then it was ultimately held beside a literal pile of bagged trash in a hallway. So I'm still pretty glad I took that job. But, the first order of business was to plan a better party. And I think we've all been there. I love them. This is just like, it was just an experience. All right, so let's do a little bit of audience participation. And I'm absolutely sure they have a much better process now and an absolutely world-class team in recruiting, building things much better than that. So let's do a little activity. So most of us are in HR here. What are some myths that you think startup founders or like startup culture has about HR? You can throw it in the chat. Yeah, so it's fluffy. It's all about only hiring people. It's not necessary. It's boring. Great. Okay, we're all on the same page here. So, they think that it's not necessary for startups. It's just a cost center. It's the fun police. Process and policies kill innovation, and process and policies kill culture. Toby from The Office. And it's, it's hard to be that first person too who comes in and does this job because people eye you with some kind of like suspicion, like you're there to ruin the fun or you're there to like drag things down. And like really like you're there, if you're at this conference, you're probably the kind of HR person who like really cares about what they do and really cares about the people that they're serving, right? Like we've all kind of been there where it's like, you walk by and someone makes a little like Toby from The Office joke and you're like, I just negotiated you a raise and you don't even know it. But anyway, we've all been there. So those are kind of the myths, that some of your founders might be starting from, and we want to kind of dispel those. So really what I start with when talking to these founders is your team really is your first and most important customer. Like you might be really be focused on your product and heads down there. But there's no product without a team. They're like, if it's not working well, like you have absolutely nothing. So your team really is your first and most important customer. So why wouldn't you devote time and resources and dedicated people like yourselves to ensure that they have a great experience? So from here, we're going to dive into 4 of the most major fuck ups that we clean up and messes that we fix. And the symptoms of them, basically how they show up and the things they can impact. So that's when we're getting into a little bit of that like fear-based, this is what can happen without this. And then we'll get into like the basics of how to do better with all of those. And then some very like more creative, bright and early style, like hacks and go beyonds to make those things really amazing and really pop. So the first one, and most important, is founders that resist policies. So I still do our initial intake calls at Bright and Early with founders that are looking to work with us. And I talk to them about like what they think about HR and what they're looking to get out of it. And inevitably they tell me that they don't have any policies because they think that their team will find it too corporate. They think that their team will see it as like an end times thing and like the fun days are over. They say, people should just be adults and use common sense. And everyone we hire takes a strong sense of ownership and acts like a leader. And if they want something, they know they can just ask me. But around 20 or 30 people, things start to break. You're not 10 people around the table anymore. Communication breaks down. We need to be really, really clear. And clarity is success. And clarity is also inclusion. So we'll get into that a little bit more. But really one of the biggest hacks to scaling your culture is the simplest, which is just writing things down. So if you want people to make decisions a certain way, document it. If you want them to behave according to a certain code or certain values, you really, really need to communicate those. So if you're cool with them taking extra time off, then write that down, clarify it. If you're about to hyperscale, basically anything you don't document or constantly communicate will get left behind. So here are some of the fuck ups that you get from not having clear policies. So you might have some scandal. So, maybe, and shouldn't laugh at this at all, but I mean, if you don't have clear policies on like harassment, inclusion, things like that, like you're not providing a clear situation or standard for people to live up to. And, you might find yourself in a situation where something goes really wrong. And, scandal, like these situations, they ruin people's lives. These are real human things. They make you look terrible. They should make you feel terrible. Not you, maybe the founders in this case. It leads to turnover. So many times I have seen employees think that a certain policy or program doesn't exist and they just leave instead of requesting it. There was one company that I worked with, and I've seen this many times. This is just one that comes to mind, where it was like a top engineer, and there was nothing in their employee handbook about parental leave. This person wanted to take a parental leave. They looked at the employee handbook. They said, I guess we don't have parental leave, but I'm thinking of planning a family. And they went and joined another company that had really good parental leave. And the founder was so upset because they're like, why didn't they just come and ask, right? Why didn't they just we could have negotiated something, but they just thought it didn't exist. You do get into some trouble recruiting. So, many candidates, especially senior or underrepresented ones, might be really turned off by a lack of policies and process. And a lack of policies is also, a lack of inclusion and psychological safety. So marginalized folks are harmed by subjective policies and lacking policies. People talk a lot in DEI, people often focus way too much on recruiting, but really, if you have really, really clear and transparent processes about how people are hired, how people are promoted, how people are paid, there's so much less room for subjectivity, and bias creeps in less and less, and people know that. So they want to join companies that do have very clear policies and very clear processes, especially as you start to grow. So, around that 20 or 30 mark, candidates are going to start asking you, what's your policy on this? What's your process on this? And often, to circle back to those founders that tell me, my team doesn't want this, one of the first things we do in our discovery process at Bright and Early is a survey of the team. And, what do they want from their work experience? How has it been for them so far? What are they craving? And inevitably, they're all craving more structure and process and policies, just the things that their founder thought they didn't want. So we'll talk about some of the basics and kind of how to go beyond. So calling it extra credit. So I won't go through all of these on handbook basics. These are all the policies that you should have in general. There's probably a couple more you could add to this, but I'll talk about the extra credit go beyond ones. So to create a really, really, really great piece of documentation, Wealthsimple also did a great job of that. We published our culture manual online, and then it has a much more in-depth version just for employees themselves. So you want to have a really defined mission, vision, company values, expected behaviors based on those values. So, if you really value speed, then let's talk about like, okay, so we want you to make decisions, like we're okay with failure. We want you to make decisions that are faster versus this. We want to write about maybe like a guide to departments, write about how you can grow your career, put it right in the handbook, like what's the review process? How do I use the L&D budget? Like office guides, products and tools used and how to use them and when. A guide to team rituals and norms, like what are the regular meetings that you have? Is it normal to, you know, share how we feel at the beginning of it? Like, do we have some special ritual where we all do this, or like what some like slang people might not know? A guide to different employee resource groups or other groups. Compensation info, I think, is a great thing to put in your documentation and employee handbook as well. Like, how often do you review compensation? Like, can it be negotiated, or is it only changed at those days? Like, who do I ask and when? And then just writing like a human. So especially if you are working at a place that is a little more casual, you know, if you're not working corporate, if you're in this session, you're probably not. Just write like a person. Like, you know, there's certain areas where it has to get a little bit legalese, but like there's no reason not to make it a fun read and not to do it in your own company voice. So that's kind of, these are some ways that we make, you know, company employee handbooks like pop a little bit more than just like, here's a bunch of policies. And you can make this like a designed website with like a password login. You can do it in Notion. You can do a PDF, make sure you update the versions. You can do all kinds of different things. Like I even have a client who keeps theirs in like GitLab, and they like being able to track the documentation changes. So lots of places to keep that. And then resources to find those things. You know, you can see your lawyers, investors are actually, like your VCs often will have, you know, resources for this, or if you work with an incubator, consultants, and then Google at your own risk. But you can always, you know, work with a lawyer to figure out like what absolutely has to be in here and what can we, you know, turn into more human writing. But yeah, basically, if it's not written down, it doesn't really exist. It doesn't matter that, you know, Dave is really cool with the founder and knows that he can ask for another few days off, or like something like that. Like it has to be the same for everyone, or it's not equitable, and it has to be written down or it doesn't exist. So fuck up number 2 is you just hire your bros. So this is a pretty common one in startups as well. You know, they're trying to move as fast as possible. Maybe they want to hire people that, you know, they've already worked with, or that their VCs like, or that they like. And like, there's nothing like totally wrong with that, but it does start to cause a lot of problems, which we'll get into. So, you know, a lot of VCs and a lot of conventional startup wisdom will tell you that like you need to hire from your network first, but I think that your network can be kind of a trap, and here's why. So you get into diversity debt. So chances are the people around you are pretty similar to you. They might look like you, think like you, have similar experience to you. And then, you know, nobody wants to be the first, you know, person of, you know, X background to join a team of people that don't look like them, think like them, act like them. Like, it's just a lot harder, you know, to like build a diverse team if you're not thinking about it from the beginning. And, you know, there are many sessions really from really great speakers in this conference specifically on this, but, you know, not having a diverse team is, you know, it impacts your ability to make products for everyone. So, you know, that's a good way to convince your founder about that as well. Like, you know, hey, is our product only for people that look like the people that work here? No, we need more perspective. You know, you're also going to have, like, if you don't have a proper hiring process, you're going to waste your team's time. They don't really know what they're looking for. They don't really know how to evaluate things. You know, they're maybe making up their own process on the fly. Either there's like no applicants, or there's tons of applicants that don't suit your needs. So it's kind of a waste of time either way. Or you're just like waiting for applicants to roll in, which, like, as HR people, as you are here, like, you will probably laugh at that because applicants are not rolling in anywhere. And, you know, it also, no process also leads to mishires. So, you know, you make the wrong hires, you have to spend time replacing them. It has an impact on culture and cost. And then you can have reputation damage as well. So, bad interview process can affect your ability to attract talent. So again, these are things that you all probably know, but it's a good list to take to your founder if they're like, hey, we don't think that we need a proper hiring process. So some of the basics are, you want to think about hiring as marketing. So, who's your target market? Where can they be found? What's your value proposition? And I'll take you through an example of this. So, I worked with a travel tech company that was B2B. So, nobody was like carrying it around in their pocket, like Simple. Nobody had heard of them and they were having trouble hiring. And they're just like, it's just so crowded and nobody's heard of us. So what we did is, we got them a target market. We're like, why don't we target people who love to travel? Like we've actually put in all these different like travel specific perks, and you can travel a lot with this job. This is pre-COVID. And you get to work with clients in countries around the world at any given time. Why don't we just like, instead of trying to stand out in a crowded market, why don't we just like hire people who love to travel? And then we thought about like, where can they be found? So instead of just posting on like tech hiring boards, we took out like op-eds of like, how I see 10 countries a year and still work a 9 to 5, or like travel blogs. Like we did some sponsorships there. And our value proposition was like, love to travel, still travel, and have like a full-time career that moves forward and pays well while you do that. So we really took some time to define that, and that'll be unique to each company. We want to organize our process, no more of these like coffee and chill interviews. We want to have questions and attributes defined and score those. We want to train our interviewers. We want to use an ATS, lots of this. And, we don't want to rely too much on applicants and referrals. And then we generally want to create a positive experience. So, respecting the time, no more proven interview processes. It's a candidate's market right now, and it is just not going to work to be like, take that attitude where it's like, prove that you're good enough to work here, right? Like you'll probably all laugh at that right now because it is just not how it is. And you want to follow up a lot and be fast. So one of the things that we publish in Early Magazine is a series of work diaries. And we recently published one from a senior software engineer who was decided to leave his job and, interview at a few different places in today's market. And he shed a lot of light on that process. And, one of the things that he mentioned was that a lot of the processes out there, it's so competitive, were less than a week start to finish entirely, from like, for like him first applying or like responding to a recruiter to offer. And there were certain ones where like, hey, the recruiter didn't have enough time like in their schedule for a few days, or they wanted them to meet the founder and the founder was busy for a couple weeks. And like, he just had like, by the time those were scheduled, he already had other offers in hand. So like these days we just got to be so fast. So these are only the basics. And these are the extra credit things that we advise our clients on. So, have a really exceptional careers page, write it like a human, make sure that it represents the diversity of your company and your goals and values. Use personas for different roles. So I have a different talk that I give about creating personas or using design thinking in HR, but you can look up the concept of personas. Really, it's just about like creating a few different kind of model people in our minds, essentially, of who is our ideal candidate, what do they care about, where are they hanging out, what's important to them, and then design around that. You can have really creative job postings. So for our own at Bright and Early, we use a lot of video, and we what else did we do? We have actually a guide in Early Magazine as well to making creative job postings that you can check out too. You can add candidates, even ones that don't make it through your process, to a newsletter and have kind of like a candidate or like interest newsletter. Engage meaningfully with communities. So these could be communities of the type of people you're trying to hire, like, in terms of their talent. So it could be like developer communities, but also if you're trying to hire, from diverse communities, engaging meaningfully with those. Creating a really good experience by sending a detailed schedule and description of each interview step ahead of time, or even post it on the job description. We do that. Run a candidate feedback survey, see where you're falling short or are succeeding. And then, diversity, and then even just hiring in general these days, it's not a pipeline issue. You have to make an effort. You really have to be like out there reaching out, as you know. And then you can lean into your product as well. So that kind of leans into this travel example that I gave, where, you know, like, Simple, we did a similar thing as well, where we asked people what they were getting out of working there, and you know, besides the regular things. And they said, you know, hey, maybe I'm not from a financial background, like I'm a developer, or I work in HR, or I work in marketing, and I'm learning so much about personal finance by working here. So we decided to lean into financial wellness in terms of like perks that we offered, and then what we were pitching to candidates as well, like work here and learn how to invest, and learn, you know, about personal finance, and you know, build success that way. So, and that'll be unique to each one. So we want to have a process. You know, hiring is not Tinder. You know, we're not following our heart. We need to follow specific processes. Sweet. All right. Fuck up number 3. You ship a MacBook and call it a day. So we're talking onboarding. We want to onboard employees like we're welcoming the most important customer. Again, our employees, especially our early stage ones that are going to have such an impact, they are our customers. The fuck ups here are, you know, new hires not ramped fast enough, or they're given misinformation, stuff isn't ready for them. We have a slow return on our investment. And then, you know, turnover, if they don't feel welcome, or if they're not like set up for success, like they'll rethink their decision to join their team, or they just won't succeed. So it's no good. It's no good. We know this. Some ways to make onboarding a little more special. So we can really design the first day experience. Like, what's it like when they walk in the door? Who greets them? What do they see on their desk or virtual desk? What does the day look like? Like, think about it like we're planning like a conference or event. I think, yeah, Priya Parker has like a really great book on designing experiences. And, you know, she's mostly talking about like parties or events or things like that. But I use these principles all the time in designing like workplace experiences. We want to have like our technical checklist, what needs to be done and set up, higher facing checklist, what do I need to accomplish in my first week, month, whatever. We also have a guide to onboarding on Early Magazine you can check out in more detail. Again, this is a pretty high level talk. We're talking about HR in general, a lot of topics. Have people learn about the whole business. And one way that we've done this is have them do, like, we've designed programs that go through in stages. So we worked with Missouri, the jewelry company, to redesign their onboarding. And the problem that they were having is that people were joining, you know, who might be like jewelry designers, or they might be in marketing, or might be in customer success, but maybe they didn't know anything about jewelry. And they were actually curious about, like, you know, how does it get made? Why do we decide what pieces to make? Like, how does anything else work? So we designed a program where they follow one jewelry drop, because they do drops every week, from like basically conception of like, why are we designing this, sitting in on a design process, sitting in on how are we going to market this particular piece, sitting in on like the production, like they would do like 3D print prototypes and things like that of the pieces. They would spend some time in retail and customer success, all across there. And then, you know, FreshBooks is also famous for something like this. You have to spend a month in customer success, even if you're an executive, before you're allowed to even start in your regular job. So having people learn about the whole business, it creates, you know, a passion in them for it. It creates a strong knowledge base. It helps them understand the customer and also get to know their coworkers. So I love that, like, real life, get your hands dirty in jobs that aren't your own style of onboarding. It's kind of our signature, and it's my favorite thing to do. And then make sure you set up some first wins and goals for them. Like at Bright and Early, we have our own new hires work with a fake client, an ice cream disruptor called Merry Go Round, and they ship a project for them at the end of the first week, and we celebrate that on our own team. For extra credit, again, you can use personas. You know, take inspiration from your UX team, and, you know, you can like get sticky notes all over the place. You can iterate, collect customer feedback. Yeah, you want to create, like, you know, send them something nice in the mail these days. That's nice to do too. I think we've all done similar things. Yeah, so onboarding. very important. And then the fourth fuck up is a lot of founders still believe in this concept of A players. Like, I only want A players. I don't want any B players, whatever those are. Or they believe in flat teams. So flat teams are like a big first-time founder mistake. Often when it's somebody's first company, they might be like really feeling the freedom from corporate culture. And, you know, they're obviously an entrepreneurial type themselves, and they felt limited by structure or managers in the past. So the first thing they often try is a flat organization. They think that having no managers will save them a ton of time, that it'll save them a ton of drama. You know, we'll just hire these A players and somehow everyone will figure it out. Let me tell you that every second time or beyond founder that I work with never has a flat organization. So there's a classic essay in, I believe it was from like one of the original feminist movements called The Tyranny of Structurelessness, which is a phrase and an essay I refer back to a lot. If you have no structure in your company, no hierarchy, it's not that you don't have power structures. It's just that you're not talking about them. You're not giving people a map to them. You're like setting them free and telling them to figure it out themselves, because in any group of people, there's always a power structure. So then power struggles happen, confusion happens, people don't know who to go to with what. Maybe two people are working on the same thing at once. Like, this is not no drama. This is not saving time. And so what we want to do is we want to have like a defined growth plan for people. We want to have a defined structure. And when we have defined growth plans, we can make our own A players. And that's a superpower to have. If we're out there just trying to like snatch up and hire these A players that other people have put the time into like creating and coaching, we're going to have a slower time to hire because we don't know how to make them ourselves. We haven't developed that. And two, like, they might not be A players for your team. Everyone is an A player somewhere, in some community, in some company, in some organization, in something that they do. They might just not be an A player at yours. So some of the repercussions here are, slow growth. So this is if we don't have kind of defined career paths, or we don't have kind of defined structure. So talent isn't focused on the right things. This is kind of, they're focusing on the wrong things. I guess that's kind of the same point. Turnover, so they leave for higher growth opportunities. Everyone's flat. I can't be promoted. They want that. People leave managers, not jobs. So we want, good manager training. We have conflict. So, they might avoid tough conversations. Nobody's given the opportunity to improve. Wrong feedback is given. Relationships suffer. And there's confusion because, again, flat organizations don't exist. Managers, we don't need to call them that if it's scary, but like they're success coaches. So it's just like HR. It's like somebody that is there to help you succeed. It's not scary. And then title confusion is a major thing that we tend to unpack as well. So especially in these flat structures, somebody joins, it's early days, and then the founder is just like, oh yeah, just have whatever title you want. And people are like, oh, I'm head of marketing, or I'm this. And then we can't hire a VP of marketing because they're the head. And like, there's all kinds of confusion around this. So to avoid this stuff generally, we want to have kind of the basics of structure and performance. So, everyone should have a regular coach or manager who holds regular one-on-ones. We want to set expectations of what those are. Everyone has goals. We want to design and widely share career paths for common roles. So like, what's the difference between junior, intermediate, and senior? And, everyone should have access to those. And we should use them for hiring. We should use them for career conversations and performance reviews. And on that note, we want to do or properly replace reviews. I know it's trendy to get rid of performance reviews, but my take here is that, like, unless you come up with something better that is achieving the same means of like people knowing what their career growth path is, their manager being aligned on that, and there being a plan to get them there, and regular like check-ins and conversations about that, like, you don't have to call that a review. You can do it another way if you want. But like, there's no like, hey, performance reviews, they take a lot of time and we don't find them effective, so we just do absolutely nothing. Like, no cop-outs there. You will lose people. So extra credit here. I love manager handbooks. A lot of people have managed before, but maybe not at your company. So let's train them and then have expectations. Like, what does a one-on-one look like at this company? Manager circles for them to kind of like share together and get together and talk about challenges that they're having and share techniques. Having a transparent compensation process. Again, there's other talks on how to do this. And then we also have a guide and early, and then training, modeling, and rewarding a good feedback culture. So we do this workshop on feedback that I really like. I think it's really transformative. Just people knowing how to give feedback is really important, even if they're whether they're managers or not. So if you have a culture of feedback, that's really great. And, executives should be modeling that and like calling out positively instances where it's happening. So the last one is not having a pay strategy. So that's just like, hey, this person asked for this and that sounds reasonable. And hey, like everybody seems to be asking for this and we think it's that. So, you end up with squeaky wheel syndrome. So, the best negotiators get the best pay. Talented introverts leave because maybe they don't want to have that conversation. Bias and inequity creep in. You could be paying too high, which is doubtful these days. You could be paying too low. And then, your board probably wants a strategy at some point on this. Just speed it up a bit for time. So the basics, you need a strategy. We need to think about like, where in the market are we paying and why? How often do we have do we review this? Is it annually, twice a year? We need bands. They need to correspond to those career levels. You can use resources like PayScale or like paid reports, but you can also sometimes like your VCs will have reports on this, or you can work with consultants. For extra credit, like you can share your philosophy on compensation and process across the organization. Align it to your values. So like, it's not just like, hey, what perks look cool, but like, what behaviors are we trying to reward? Like if we have bonuses that are like incentive based, are those forcing people to be competitive? Like, what are we really rewarding? And the same note, we want to have perks that showcase our values, not to keep up or show off. So if we really value mental health, we're going to invest more into that than just like, hey, kombucha. That might be good for mental health. I don't know. Not really. And then we want to train managers to talk about the compensation strategy because people are going to go to them and negotiate and ask for raises. So they should know the philosophy inside and out. Oh, there's a fifth one, but it is marked as the fourth. So not measuring anything. So we have all these programs that we're building and we want to make sure that, they're succeeding in the ways that we want to. So I like to do a lot of surveys. So, where are we getting applications from? What is the diversity of our candidate sources? What is our success rate at different stages of recruiting? Are we collecting candidate feedback? What are the patterns in our offers? Are they being declined more often these days? Let's get feedback on onboarding, employee engagement. What are our DEI statistics and patterns? And when I say patterns, we'll usually measure it against engagement. Performance patterns. Is it different under a certain manager or in a certain department? And that's kind of manager effectiveness. And then turnover is a classic one to measure as well. So yeah, just steal from your design team and iterate on things. There's no perfect process, but if you're collecting feedback on all of these different things and seeing how they're working for your team, you should be able to kind of tweak it here and there and come up with a process that's really unique. So again, this is a very, very high level talk. You could use it to focus a little bit more on, convincing your founder, of the pitfalls of not investing in certain areas. Maybe there were some tips in here that you kind of hadn't thought of to take your work to the next level, or maybe you're earlier in your career and some of these things you haven't done before and it was helpful. So I hope regardless of any of those, that it was helpful for you. Some ways that you can do this, like hiring, doing things yourself, or working with and augmenting with consultants can be an option as well. Yeah. And then if you want to follow along with us, like I said, we open source a lot of our much more specific content in all of these areas. So if you're like, hey, cool that you said I need a compensation strategy, where the heck do I start? We write about that. We share about it. check out earlymagazine.com, and also check out our website. And on both, you can sign up for our newsletter. It actually comes out every Friday, and there's one coming out tomorrow, and there's going to be a lot of resources and fun stuff in there. We like to write it like humans as well, so it's not just kind of another boring business letter in your inbox. So hope to see you there. Feel free to connect with us and me specifically on social as well. And yeah, thanks for coming. I feel like I packed a lot in here. It's a lot, but yeah.
That was amazing. Thank you so much, Nora. I think we do have time for one question, if that's okay with you. There is one in the chat from a few minutes ago that says, when you create personas, how do you ensure that you use an EDI lens to them and aren't instilling inequities? That you aren't creating a culture fit persona or limiting your mental search with a persona?
Yes. So we're not, I don't really like the term culture fit. So when we're talking about personas, we want to just like basically think about a person that would make it through our interview process, which is hopefully also equitably designed. So we're not thinking about like willy-nilly things like culture fit, like would I like to get a beer with them or something like that. It's like do they follow, like do they have the same values as us? Do they have the skills and background that we want to add to our team? So we're focusing a little more there and less on like they like baseball, which is like more of a marketing style of persona, where it's like Bob likes baseball and getting a beer. Like I wouldn't suggest using like those types of ones, but just taking the things that you are already baking into your interview process. But that's a really good point, that I would avoid putting like certain like personality traits or hobbies or like more personal things in that, and focus on the work and the values and the things that you're evaluating.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I think with that, I'll wrap us up. I'll just say, Nora, thank you so much. It was an absolute pleasure to learn from you today. Your presentation was super fun, interactive. I know I wrote down a ton of very helpful, really fun little nuggets of wisdom. My personal favorite was definitely hiring isn't Tinder. Don't follow your heart. I love it. Super memorable. For the audience, definitely recommend going to look for Nora Jenkins Townson on LinkedIn. As she mentioned, her social, founder of Bright and Early. Follow along with her work. It's relevant and so important. I think after this, I would totally encourage you all to check out the networking sessions happening throughout the day. And I'll just wrap us up and say thank you so much. I hope you enjoy the rest of the sessions today and tomorrow. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.